I'll be your tour guide today. Our ground crew today is Adam. He'll be operating our turntable, and he'll make sure everyone else in the museum is safe while the train is moving. And our engineer today is Eric, who will be in the cabin, driving us around the facilities today. Welcome aboard. Please find a seat. Do not stand up while the train is moving, and please keep all body parts inside the car while the train is in motion. Successful railroad company to date. The company was the Central of Georgia Railway, which was founded in 1833 by William Washington Gordon. If you don't know who that is, don't worry, he's not the most famous person in his family. In fact, his granddaughter is much more famous than he ever was, because she was the founder of the Girl Scouts, Juliet. But before there was an idea to build a railroad facility here, history had already taken place. Because believe it or not, we're also on top of a Revolutionary War battlefield. On October 9, 1779, the Battle of Savannah took place here, which was one of the bloodiest battles in the entire war, lasting only 55 minutes long. What's important for this tour isn't the bloody details of the fight. What's important for us is to recognize the soldiers from other countries that were here fighting alongside the Continental Army. Alongside the Americans on this very ground were soldiers from parts of the world that we would know today as France, Haiti, the Dominican Republic, Ireland, Sweden, Switzerland, Austria, Germany, Poland, and Lithuania. And we're all here to help us try and retake Savannah from the British. Among these were key figures like Count Casimir Pulaski, a Polish nobleman hired by George Washington to train and lead the United States cavalry. Also at this battle was a 12-year-old drummer boy from Haiti named Henri Christophe, who after the war became one of the leaders of the Haitian Revolution, the largest and most successful slave revolt in history. After which he was elected the first president of Haiti, after which he gave up his presidential office to crown himself Haiti's first king. Finally at this battle was a Swedish colonel named Kurt von Steding, who carried the American flag onto the battlefield. He was one of the few people to make it to the British lines during the fighting, and as a result, he was grievously wounded multiple times. Fortunately, though, Colonel von Steding survived his injuries, and when he returned home to Sweden after the war, he was promoted from colonel to field marshal, becoming the highest-ranked officer in the Swedish army at the time. Now, decades later, the city of Savannah granted the Central of Georgia Railroad 28 acres of land on which the battle had taken place. Between Turner Street on the right behind that glass tower and Stone Street to the left on the other side of our facility, from 1834 to 1855 was constructed into Georgia's first rail yard. And currently, what we're rolling on to right now is the site's turntable. Now, this turntable has been here for 102 years this year, and it's one of 16 of its kind left in the United States. It's 85 feet long, powered by electricity, and is the fourth turntable to ever be here. The original table was built in 1852, was 55 feet long, and was powered by hand. But not powered by hand with a crank, powered by hand with poles that you had to push. Now, the original table was so well balanced that with the train on it, you only needed one man on each end pushing the poles to turn it. This current table today is so well balanced that with 80 tons of train on it, the two engines that are currently spinning us only have 7 horsepower each. Meaning right now, at your local hardware store, there is a lawnmower that has a more powerful and higher horsepower engine than what is turning us right now. Now, if you look at the rim of the table, you'll also see that there are no hooks, no latches, no locks. There's very little stopping us from misaligning the tracks. If those rails are out of alignment by less than an inch when we make this platform, there's a pretty good chance the train will jump off them. The only thing stopping that from happening is Adam and the control point at the back of the car. Now, this is his fourth month doing this, and I think he's been doing fantastic. He's been trained in this ancient art called eyeballing it, so he knows exactly how the rails are supposed to line up. And in the 2.5 years I've been doing this, eyeballing it has not failed any of my tours yet. Now, alongside being a museum, we also continue the work that this site had done for over a century by actively doing railroad repair and restoration work. And behind our car in the roundhouse, we're currently restoring this silver train car, the 374. This car ran through central Georgia in the 1950s as part of the Nancy House, one of the flagship trains of this company. We've been working at it for over a year now, restoring it inside and out. As part of the project, we decided to get rid of its old matte black paint and give it back its original silver and blue streamlined color scheme that it wore 70 years ago, transporting passengers between Savannah and Atlanta in less than 5 hours at a time. But that is just one small part of what we do here at the museum. And in just a few moments when the rails are realigned, we're going to start to back up towards the paint shop where the rest of our restoration work is done. Now, the paint shop is one of our youngest buildings, dating back to the year 1925. So it's celebrating its centennial anniversary this year. It was one of several construction and renovation projects going on in the 1920s, because the Roaring Twenties is when this railroad company and this facility were at its busiest. 100 years ago, we would see 1,000 employees working on this 5-acre property in 12-hour shifts every single day. The hours were long, the work was hard, and I can't stress this enough. The pay was pretty bad. A blacksmith's assistant in the 1920s once reported he was earning 22 cents every hour, which in today's money would be $4.19, $3 under the minimum wage. A machinist working on site would be paid 3 times as much for operating all the power tools, which would come around to $12.30 an hour today. That's definitely above the minimum wage for sure, but it's still $5 less than what a entry-level cashier at one of our local grocery stores in the Low Country earns every hour. Now, the painting shop that we're approaching was one of the busiest buildings on site, with a near 60,000 square foot work floor that can hold 32 train cars at all times. Below it is a basement just as large, bringing the total surface area of the work floor of the building to be over 3 million cubic feet. In the basement, there were multiple departments where workers would maintain parts for the train cars, including an upholstery department, an electronics center, a printing shop, and 2 chemistry labs. The company would make and mix their own painted blood and make their own routines with each other in the 1940s and 50s. This building is home to most of our restoration work, including half a dozen train cars, 2 Australian trolleys, a Ford Model T, and a Ford Model A. And if you look at the leftmost of the doors behind these wall trees, you'll see the great 1937 Burroughs train. Burroughs was Swiss Army knife railroad repair, and that particular one is our engineer Eric's personal project here at the museum. The train was 14 tons, and it came with multiple attachments, including a sword, a hook, a buzzsaw, and an electromagnet. So not only did we convert the rails, but also tracks of scrap iron and clear branches overlooking the rails. All without a single piece of hydraulic equipment or electronics in it whatsoever. Operating entirely off of gears and brake bands. So as I mentioned before, the painting shop here was one of the busiest sites in the facility. There would be dozens of painters on this floor at any given time of day, painting countless train cars that would enter and exit this building on a daily basis. Now, this place was busy for a few reasons, one of which was thanks to some new technology that was installed while the building was being constructed. There was an air system that was put into the building that allowed the painters to replace their brushes with spray guns that allowed them to cover cars with paint much quicker than before. In fact, this place was so quick and efficient that it wasn't just Central of Georgia Railroad cars that were worked on in here. Rival railroad companies like Atlantic Coastal Line and Seaboard Airline Rail would send their cars to their competitors' workshop to get worked on. And if you were part of the night shift working in this building, you received the benefit that the day shift didn't get. Because when the sun went down, the company was kind enough to turn the lights on for you. During the day, those lights would be off. That doesn't mean this place was dark like it is right now. Quite the opposite. This place was very bright during the day. This building was set up as something called a daylight factory, meaning that originally, most of, if not all of its light came directly from the sun during the day. This was achieved thanks to the massive windows on the southern and western sides, these massive northern doors, and the rest was all done thanks to the ceiling above our heads. Now the ceiling, it looks like a series of waves that runs all the way to the back of the room. This is called a sawtooth. And in every single one of those waves, on the steep side, which we can see right above us, there are those wavy panels of metal. 100 years ago, those would have been replaced by glass windows, a quarter of an inch thick, reinforced with wire. With them running the entire length of the building, and with every triangle having one, that allowed for total coverage of the work floor with nothing but sunlight every single day. Now, sawtooths are very common. You'll see them all over the world. And wherever you see them, they all have one thing in common. The windows will always face away from the equator. So for us on the top half of the world, they will always face north. This is for two reasons. Firstly, those north windows regulate the internal temperature. With them facing away from direct sunlight at various points throughout the year, this building wasn't too hot in the summer and not too cold in the winter. But secondly, and more importantly, those windows acted as a filter, allowing certain amounts and certain colors of sunlight to come in. Now, as we all know, the light from the sun changes color all throughout the day. Particularly at sunup and sundown, the light can be a vibrant red, orange, or even purple or pink. That's around the same time when the shifts are changing over and new paint is being mixed by the painters. And if you as a painter come in the morning and let's say those windows in the ceiling were facing towards the east, and that purple, red, or pink light were to shine onto the train car you've been assigned and you're not paying attention while you're mixing paint, you may accidentally make the wrong color. As soon as you pop that in your spray gun, start putting on a few coats, once the sun rises higher in the sky and you realize you made a mistake, all that paint then has to be stripped off with a blowtorch and you have to start all over again. Now today, 100 years later, we still use this building, and we have two major projects going on here at the moment, and it's these two train cars behind us and to our left. First one I'll talk about is this red train car.
Gosh.
That is one of our oldest pieces of rolling stock, dating back to the year 1911, where it was built in Augusta, Georgia, originally as a segregated passenger car. That's the 67, and you may have seen it in a Disney movie a few years ago. How many of you have seen the live-action remake of Lady and the Tramp that came out about 8 years ago?
Oh, me, I didn't see.
Thank goodness it's not just me and Eric this time. So, those of you who haven't seen it, if you have Disney Plus, put that film on. Because Disney used Savannah as their set to make a movie. And in the scene where they introduce the tramp, they're filming here, in this rail yard. You will see the tramp run out that car, run through our roundhouse, and interact with members of our railroad operations crew, who Disney hired to work that scene. In fact, we have someone that was in that movie with us on the tour today. Our engineer, Eric, is one of the men you see in that scene of the movie. Now, as impressive as the 67 is, it's not our oldest car. Our oldest is this one right behind us. This is the number 2. It dates back to the year 1878, and it was built here, in this very rail yard. And that's about all we know about it. There's very little documentation that we can find about that car, except we found the primary source inside the car, carved into the wood in the walls by a worker in 1906. We know that whoever did that was turning that car from a passenger coach into an inspection car, which was then used by the railroad superintendent on his yearly inspection tour of the tracks. Which meant every single year, that car traveled 2,000 miles of rail, and the man inside was inspecting every last part of it. Now, alongside that car in our turntable, we have one more record to speak of. This facility is officially the largest, most complete collection of pre-Civil War railroad structures in the entire country. And there's many people we can thank for the site being here for over 160 years and more. But the first person we can thank before all the others is General William Tecumseh Sherman for not burning it to the ground during the Civil War.
Exactly.
Now, this site has had a few close calls with destruction over the years. And the first time was during Sherman's march in the Civil War. Now, this march involved 63,000 Union soldiers marching 300 miles in 5 weeks. Now, this march also didn't have any supply lines connected to it. So no food, no medicine, no ammunition was coming in. These soldiers were then forced to forage and raid for their supplies. One of their favorite things to raid was the Central of Georgia Railroad, because the Confederates for the last 4 years had advanced their supply line. As the soldiers followed the tracks from Atlanta to Savannah, raiding as they went, they would sabotage the rail tracks by ripping them out of the ground, heating them up in a fire until the iron grew soft, and then they would wrap the rails around the streets. These became known as Sherman's bow ties, and we have a replica of one here in our museum in our garden outside the tennis range. Now, after 5 weeks of marching, 90% of Central Georgia Railroad was destroyed. And it's a wonder that this place was so long to rest. Not only was this the main operating hub for the company, but the Confederates during the war were using it as a place to maintain their firearms and field artillery during the war. But then, 100 years after Sherman's march, the site was almost destroyed again. In the 1960s, with the introduction of diesel engines, this site was slowly dying year after year. And by 1963, the company was losing out against these larger interstate rail systems. And their rival, Southern Railway, purchased the entire property outright. When Southern sent inspectors to take a look at this particular property, they weren't impressed with what they found here. What they saw value was what they could sell and what they could salvage. And what piqued their interest most was the old Savannah gray brick that makes up the oldest parts of this yard. Prime example of Savannah gray is these inner walls of the roundhouse. That brick is very rare and highly sought after. It's lighter and stronger than modern red clay, and no one knows how to make it anymore because no one ever wrote down the recipe. There are a lot of Savannah gray brick buildings here in the Low Country, particularly in Savannah and Charleston, and the owners of those buildings will pay top dollar for this material. In 1963, Savannah gray brick was going for $20 a piece. $20 in 1963 is $200 today. So it's no wonder that for the next 10 years, Southern Railway tore this place apart, brick by little brick, destroying half the roundhouse, ripping out all the deciding if they wanted to manage this property on behalf of Savannah. And what you see around us now is 36 years of maintenance and care on behalf of our nonprofit organization. Now, in just a few moments, we're going to head back down to the end of the line to bring this tour to a close. But in the 1960s, instead of an end of the line, there would be a bridge that would take us across the street to join the rail system. Unfortunately, in the early 70s, around 1971, the bridge had to be destroyed because too many 18-wheelers were getting stuck underneath it. Now, Savannah in the 60s had become the third largest port on the East Coast, third only to Baltimore and New York City. One of the main roads out of Savannah, in and out for the trucks, was down Louisville Road and under the bridge. That bridge was built in the 1850s, way before semi-trucks were invented. So for the truck drivers to safely squeeze under it, they would have to deflate all their tires and then reinflate them all on the other side. Now, there's one thing a port city doesn't want. It's the anger of the truck drivers that are keeping the port alive. Particularly because of one bridge that is wasting their time at best, or ripping the tops off their trucks like a can opener at worst. This went doubly so in the 60s and 70s, because this is when the truck drivers union was at their most powerful. Particularly due to the fact that their national president at the time was a very dangerous and well-connected man. This man's name was Jimmy Hoffa. He was one man you didn't want to cross. So, before the paperwork was filed to turn this place into a national landmark, when the truck drivers asked for help, Savannah got rid of the bridge, which unfortunately has severed us from the rail system ever since. So now if any train needs to get out of here, the only way they can do so is in pieces being carried by a group of 18-wheeler trucks. And if that's not irony, I don't know what is. But irony cuts both ways, because Savannah only destroyed one of its historic rail bridges. There's another one in front of us on the intersection from the 1850s that only has 12 feet of clearance under it. Now, an 18-wheeler with a shipping container on it is 13 feet 6 inches tall. You all could do the math on this one. If you drive under that bridge, you will see scratches and gouges inside the tunnel from all the trucks that had their GPS lead them under there and they didn't make it out the other side. Last time I saw that happen was 2 months ago while I was trying to get into work. The time before that was even more coincidental, because I was on this train car describing the inside of the tunnel right as a truck drove under. I couldn't have planned it any better even if I wanted to. But thankfully, in both cases, the trucks were able to safely back out and find another way safely to their destination. Now, as we're backing up, I'd like to ask everybody, please remain in their seats until you hear the train's horn sound off one time. That'll be the sign that we've come to a stop, and you'll then be free to get up and listen. With all that being said, thank you all very much for joining us here on this ride. Thank you for your patronage and helping us out with our 36-year-old nonprofit project of education, restoration, and preservation. And thank you all once again for joining us here at the Georgia State Railroad Museum. Thank you all. So I have to use this tour 6 times a day, and the tour changes all the time. I'm at the point where I can basically just pick and choose what I want to talk about. Have a good night.